It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
So let's jump right into this. So stability. First of all, what is stability? I can tell you what, this is going to be beyond survival. This is not, because I will tell you, we're going to show you some stats in a minute, show you most Americans are struggling just to get the basics right, and stability is beyond that.
That's exactly right, Brian. When you say beyond survival, what you're suggesting is that you're no longer living paycheck to paycheck. That's not the area that you are at. Now, all of us maybe start there. When we first come into the workforce, that's what it looks like. But stability's not that. It's beyond that point.
Yeah, you're also practicing that first step of the wealth building process, discipline, meaning you're living on less than you make. You understand the power of deferred gratification in the journey to building that great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
And then as you're in this stability phase, as you're practicing that deferred gratification, you're also starting to see some good things happen. You're starting to see some of your bad debt balances like credit cards or auto loans or store loans begin to go away, begin to decrease, or even really maybe become non-existent.
So let's talk about what stability is not, though, Bo. I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that it's not income-based. And what we mean by that is that there are a lot of people that make great incomes that still never make it to stability because they can't conquer the discipline where they spend more than they make. This is a big part. I want you guys to understand, yes, there are 5 levels to wealth, but the vast majority of people won't even make it to step 1.
That's exactly right. The second thing that stability is not is it's not a given because you're a certain age. We see this all the time. Someone says, hey, I hit 40, so that means I deserve, or I am at 65, so I deserve. Stability is not a given just because you attain some certain age. It is more about your behavior and the decisions that you've made. You have to make sure you're doing the financial things correctly that you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and I'm often reminded we do live in a consumer society. If you think about all the ad agencies, everything that's pushing you to buy more and more, and that leads us to a lifestyle that's driven by decisions that are $100 a month. If you think about it, you can buy an RV, you can buy a car, you can buy a boat. Everything just seems like, hey, if you're willing to take that amortization chart out a few more years, you can afford it $100 at a time. That is not what stability is.
And here's what's amazing, Brian. You've already alluded to this, but there are a frightening number of Americans who have not mastered even this base level step of wealth building. Listen to this. 56% of Americans, this is according to Bankrate, have less than $1,000 in savings right now. So if some emergency came along, they would not be able to pay for that emergency to cover it if it was over $1,000.
I was a little sad about this slide because we know, as you can see in the footnote there, this is data as of January of 2022. And here we are in January of 2023 recording this content. I know any day now, Bankrate's going to have their brand new data.
Sure.
This is skewed by the pandemic relief money that came out. This number is well over 60 typically. I would not be surprised, as you see in our future, and we're going to show you savings rates here in a minute, this number is going to go back to 60 or above again in the future, I believe.
And so because people aren't doing this, we now know that half of Americans carry a balance on a credit card. 55% of Americans carry a credit card balance from month to month. And when you look at the average size of that balance, the average unpaid balance, it's a little over $6,500. So not only does the average person is not able to come up with $1,000 for mercy, but they're actually $6,500 in the hole when it comes to their overall financial situation.
And I've alluded to that in this consumer society, it seems like everybody's pushing you to buy everything at $100 a month increment. You can see that in people's decisions on how they buy vehicles. I find it interesting that the average auto loan is 70 months. The average amount financed on a new car has risen to close to $42,000 a year. None of this ties into those incremental decisions that we share with you guys on how to actually be really good with wealth building.
And it's alarming because when you look at the average amount of automobiles financed, it's actually been increasing through time. Now, look, we get it. We understand that things are difficult out there. We know that the current economic environment is not necessarily making things easier. In the summer of 2022, a survey found that 40% of Americans are having a difficult time just affording typical household expenses like bills or groceries, because we know that inflation's a thing. We know that things are becoming more expensive. So stability in and of itself is a difficult thing to attain right now, but it's not impossible.
Well, you need the context because you see that 40% and you're like, well, wow, that's a much higher number than I would expect, especially the context I wanted to provide is that a year earlier, that's data from 2022, 2021, the same question, same data point, that number was 27%.
Oh, wow.
So you can see we do live in a world right now where inflation and other things are making things more expensive. I think people are feeling the pressure. We're not tone deaf on that, but we're still telling you, look, we're going to give you the tools, the resources, even in difficult times, to know what to do to master this situation.
So even if you are someone out there struggling in this current economic environment, you can still live in the stability phase. So here are some signs that you're doing it right. Here are some inclinations that, okay, I'm doing this correctly, and perhaps I'm even ready to move to the next level. Number one is you have your deductibles covered. If you're following the financial order of operations, Brian, you want to hold it up. If you go to
yeah, come on. You know how this works.
moneyguy.com/resources. Our step number one is deductibles covered. That's just getting oftentimes around that $1,000 in the bank so that you do not get derailed. If you've already done that and you have that money sitting aside, it's a good sign that you're doing the stability phase right.
You're also getting that free money from your employer with the employer match. You have a budget or a forced scarcity plan. A lot of people, look, I get it. Budgeting's not fun, but it's one of those things while you're working on the foundation of your wealth building journey, you kind of have to know where the money's going. It's easy to say, live on less than you make, spend less than you make. That sounds so easy to say, but in practice, it means you actually have to use and be very deliberate with building a budget to know where the money's going.
And in doing that, not only are you covering your deductibles, but you're also beginning to see your emergency fund building. We know that we want to have somewhere between 3 to 6 months of our living expenses in an emergency fund. When you're in the stability phase, you're starting to move closer and closer to that goal. Again, so that when the unknowns come along, you don't feel like you are completely derailed.
And I also want people to avoid that trap. I feel like because of this consumer society, the high interest debt that, it seems like it's such an easy path to use the credit cards, to use the store credit cards, to use a line of credit that even against your home. Be careful of these debt traps because they really can impede your going up in your levels of wealth.